Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is going to be a different video than I usually do because we have an interview with the CEO of Credenzio Studios, a dev team that's working on an ambitious MMORPG called Lionhearts. This is a medieval era game, specifically during the time period of the Crusades, that is as player-driven can get. You have religion, military, conquest, guilds. Hell, you even got real estate, brother. You name it, all player driven. As you know, most of the games I play on my channel are medieval, if not medieval fantasy, which is why I'm very excited to be talking about this game with you guys today. If you are into the medieval genre like I am, please go to Lionhearts on Steam and wishlist it. And if you are willing to, go to their Kickstarter and click notify on launch. They also have a list of all the different donation tiers and the rewards that each tier provides, such as in-game cosmetics, exclusive titles, and access keys. All the links will be in the description below. The game is in its very early stages, and the devs are hard at work into making a demo for us to try out. Just to let everyone know, this is not a paid promotion. This is just an interview I wanted to do because I am very excited for this game. And also, I am not the best at interviews, let alone asking the questions, because I have the thought process of a squirrel on controlled substances. Let's get into it. Welcome to the video. I am going to be interviewing one of the members, if not the CEO of Credenzio. Is that how you say it?
Crudenzio, that's right.
And your name is Colton.
Yes.
What is the studio about exactly? And how did y'all become Credenzio?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Thanks for having me. Well, I founded Crudenzio Studios in 2020 during the pandemic.
Fairly new, yeah.
Yeah, I was just graduating college. I got a degree in history. The name Crudenzio, actually, we kind of were working as a hobby, like unofficial studio for years before under that name. And it comes from my great-grandfather's name, Crescendo, who was an Italian-American immigrant. And I've always loved my Italian heritage. So I kind of played with the name, and I just liked the way that Credenzio sounded, and we've stuck with it.
And then from what I can tell, or from what I've seen, you have a minor in Italian as well, right?
Yes, actually, I do.
And your degree is history.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, well, perfect. So then we're talking to the right people, making a medieval MMORPG. Yeah. How big is your team?
Yeah, so we started in 2020, and we kind of grew slowly. Zach is my business partner, who also is a part owner of Credenzio Studios, and then Andrew, who is one of our longest tenured employees, who's the creative director of Lionhearts. They've been here since the beginning. And on top of that, we've got several other people in the office. So right now, about 5 people total in the office, not including me, in person here in Colorado. And then we have a large global team. We have people in Sweden that are working with us. We have people in North Macedonia that we're partnering with, people in Asia, people in the Middle East. And so we have a really big global team of over hundreds of contractors that we've worked with and that we have network with. Right now, the team on Lionhearts is probably about 30 to 40, if I was to recall.
Okay. And Lionheart specifically, like Lionheart's Crusade, right? That is like if I recall, Roblox
That's right.
mod, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's a mod isn't quite the right word they would use for it, but
Okay.
it's they call it experience.
Okay. That's
But
fair.
it's basically its own game. So Roblox is a platform.
Mhm.
It hosts games just like Steam. It's just also an engine. So imagine if Steam and Unreal Engine were the same. It's just the engine's a lot different, and it's a lot
Right.
more limiting in some ways. Not in others. It's very good at creating certain niche games. It can be very accessible and easier to learn, kind of hard to master. On top of that, uh, Roblox, because it acts as a publisher, sometimes it can be easier to get the game out there if it's a really good game. The
Mhm.
algorithm will promote it just like a YouTube video. And we created Lionheart's Crusade in 2020. And we've been working on that product for years and years. And about a year ago, actually less, I think 9 months ago, we decided that we'd like to move the game to Steam, just recreate it because we feel like the audience is better there. Medieval's not really a huge category on Roblox. Luckily, though, we were able to try out and demo and really practice everything we needed to to be prepared for this
Right.
because the Lionhearts Crusade game on Roblox is massive and it has a lot of the systems and ideas that Lionhearts on Steam will have.
Well, and I figured like coming from the Roblox stance, I'm assuming because the range and the ambitions of the game is it's big, right? And so I'm assuming for a lot of people it's a lot easier to load all sorts of assets and to put those in um, a singular game, right?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, Roblox, you have to make all your own stuff. You can use free assets just like you could on Unreal. We didn't do that. So we made hundreds and hundreds of 3D assets on our own. Had to make those in Blender. We had to make hundreds of thousands of lines of code to facilitate the game. And so it's funny because a lot of people, I don't know if they understand, like from an outside glance, it's hard to understand Roblox, but it is a very independent engine in the way that as a developer, you still have to do all the things and learn all the skills you would on any other engine.
Right.
It's just its own niche. Uh, but part of the perception of Roblox is one of the reasons that we want to move is because, as a 27-year-old, I don't
I
really
see.
want to play Roblox with my friends, right? But if we could hop on a Steam game, that's great. And so a lot of people come onto Roblox and they're surprised to find Lionhearts there. And they say, guys, like they tell their friends, guys, come play this Roblox game's crazy. It's like it's really cool, it's mature, it's not um, it's not like a typical Roblox game, but at the same time, it people just don't believe them because Roblox has its reputation as being a kids platform. And that's
Right.
something that we've been fighting against and trying to overcome for a while, but ultimately we just decided it'd be better to move and go to where the audience for medieval games is.
Right. And there's actually they people call it niche, but the audience on Steam for a medieval game that sticks is big. People play it. It shows in the previous games that a lot of these games have their peaks, such as like Mordhau, Chivalry 2.
Sure.
And it's not just like I think you're pulling the right move. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. Moving to Steam, but again, very very it's gonna be a tough move, I think, for y'all because it's just going from Roblox to Steam, and I'm assuming you're starting basically from scratch, correct?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in some ways we are, but in some ways we aren't. So the ways in which we're not is game design. And game design actually saves a ton of time when you
Mm-hmm.
have it figured out. So knowing exactly what you're going to do, how you're going to execute, the different ways and methods that you want to design your systems and your core gameplay loop, that's all stuff we've learned from trial and error for years. Now, it's a difficult move, sort of, because of the time it takes. I'd say it's more
Mm-hmm.
of a time consuming move. But all the skills you learn as a developer are applicable, So when you're a level designer, when you go to Unreal, it's actually easier. Unreal's an easier engine to use for level design, for for terrain work. It's much more powerful. You can get a much better looking map much quicker. The workarounds that you have to use on Roblox right now because they don't have the built-in integrations.
Mm-hmm.
You can download plugins, but the workarounds are very taxing. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of effort. There's not a ton of support, although it's getting better. It's just not designed for a massive multiplayer game or an RPG to the same way, and that's why those games aren't necessarily as successful on that platform.
One more thing, Slayers Unleashed 2. What? How? What is that? What is that exactly? Like, is that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, we've been developing for the last year. We transitioned to develop a product called Slayers Unleashed 2, which is a sequel to Slayers Unleashed, which is a product we don't own, but we partnered with the previous owners to develop their sequel. and it's a game that we're very proud of. It's just in its beta now. It's still getting some final touches and polish, but it's an awesome game. It's inspired by, you know, an anime world in feudal Japan, Taisho era Japan. Um, Obviously taking some inspiration from the Demon Slayer show, but it's
Mhm.
not affiliated with that IP. And it has its own lore and its own naming and stuff like that. So it's essentially a game where you fight demons or you can become a demon. There's a cool sort of soft permadeath mechanic where you can, if you die to a demon, there's a chance you'll become a demon and then you have to convert back. So there's some punishing, more hardcore mechanics, which a lot of the players like. And we kind of styled it like a Studio Ghibli movie. Like we
Okay.
really worked hard to um, make its own unique style and niche. We also came up with a unique thing called the fragment system. So instead of default abilities, you can actually mix and match different ability types and combine them into an ability combo called a fragment. And by doing that, you can unlock these cool and custom abilities, and there's hundreds of thousands of possible combinations. So you can really develop your own unique fighting style.
You guys have credentials pretty much. This sounds good. You guys have your game design sounds pretty in depth with most of these games. Um which will lead us to our main topic, which is the Lionhearts standalone. Lionhearts in general, how would you describe that to a person that is just like looking it up, looking up Credenzio
Yeah.
Studios? How would you explain the experience and how would you explain the gameplay loop?
Yeah, Lionhearts is a feudal medieval MMO, and it takes place in the Third Crusade of history, where
Okay.
players control and interact with the world in fantastic and innovative ways. The core loop is to gain favor in your kingdom so you can ascend up the social hierarchy, going from serf to page to knight to even a lord or a king, and then acquiring the rewards that come with those social positions. So, for example, if you become a knight, you gain access to being able to lease domiciles on lands and work for lords directly and enter into tournaments and enlist. If you become a king, you can own an entire kingdom. And one of the unique things about Lionhearts is there's only one king per kingdom across all the world servers. So if you're the king of England, you're like a celebrity, and it's a huge monumental responsibility, which is why it's not actually the main objective. Not everybody's going to become king. It's too difficult. The main objective is more like to become a knight or a lord, and people, the very esteemed and who have the most merit, will work themselves up to the top. But even as a lord, you can start your own retinue and have your own sort of micro kingdom within a kingdom, controlling different tax rates and leasing land and using various sandbox mechanics to improve that land. Alongside the military tree, though, you can also be a tradesman or in the religious tree. So you could rank up in religion, learning different prayers, or become a tradesman, learning how to craft swords and doing all sorts of things. And because it's a persistent world with a persistent economy, all these things that are created by players and interact with real supply and demand, including the land itself, which has supply and demand in limited quantity.
So, in that sounds like a lot of ways you can play the game. Because if I
Yeah.
recall, you have a religious route you can go as well, um, going from um, archbishop, or sorry, how does it start actually? Let me start with that actually. So
Yeah.
when you're
So
going through these rules, yeah.
the religious starts with deacon.
Hmm.
It goes up and yeah, or I'm sorry, it starts with layman, deacon. Uh, wow, you're quizzing me here on my own. Whoops. Now, eventually you become a monk, and then to lock into that tier, you can become a priest.
Uh-huh.
Once you choose priest, you can't become a lord. I mean, I'm sorry,
Right.
you can't become a knight or
Okay.
a artisan. Like each tree sort of locks late game, so you can become all the classes below that. Like I could be a monk and a knight, but I couldn't be a knight and a priest. Once you specialize, you specialize into that tier. So that's more of a balance concern. Also, just realistically, you wouldn't be the pope and the king and the trade master. right? So
There would be a lot of problems if that were the
yeah,
case.
you don't want, and trust me, you don't want that because, as I said, and we've learned through Lionheart's Crusade, where we very much have this military tier established with these persistent ideas.
Mhm.
Becoming a king is hard work, and it's almost like a part-time job. Now we have reasons and no, we have systems that are going to kind of mitigate that and make it not much of a chore, and it's still going to be exciting and fun.
Mhm.
But heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's not, it's not for the light of heart, the
Right,
faint of
and
heart.
you can't just give like the best role, right, or like the top tier role without actually working for it, and so that absolutely
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. It's a
Yeah.
meritocracy at the top, and people who are casual players might be turned off by that, but you can still have fun at any tier. We're gonna make sure that the game is fun from the minute you start playing
Mhm.
at whatever role you're at. And if you decide that a mid tier or lord or knight or just becoming a baker, like I discussed with Pixelated Apollo, if that's what you want to do,
Yeah.
you're actually participating in helping your kingdom, and you can still grow your wealth um, horizontally. You can still, you can still progress horizontally, if not vertically.
Right, and you could just be the best baker in the world. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and you'll get renown, and you'll be important, and you'll earn wealth that way.
What you're describing is an experience that some companies have probably dreamed about trying to encapsulate in a game, and um, like your motto, forging the extraordinary. This sounds like a very extraordinary experience. Um, I will say though, when we go back to the starting roles, um, where would you start? Like, is it like Jerusalem? Is that right, or where would
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
So we're starting a campaign on Kickstarter,
Uh-huh.
and we're hoping to get everybody's support. The biggest thing you could do is follow that to support it. But depending on how much we raise with our Kickstarter will depend on the scope and the territory, because we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. We're more
Right.
aware than most of how much effort it takes to make a game like this. It's incredibly ambitious. So we've actually deliberately planned everything with, how do we make this as simple and easy to make as possible so that people can play it and have fun quicker, and we're not working on Star Citizen for 20 years, and
Yeah.
that's
Right.
great, and they have $1 billion to do that, but that's not
Yeah. Not all
um,
companies have that, and not all
right, and not
studios.
to say
Yeah.
that we can't get there one day. It's
Right.
just, if the idea doesn't work on a small scale, it doesn't work on a big scale. That's
Absolutely.
one of the biggest misnomers, I think, with game development. People think the bigger it is, the better. And, there are games that are the size of the islands of Great Britain, and there's nothing to do. And you can run
Mhm.
around all day, but there's nothing there, and it's not fun, and people get bored. And so the most important thing as far as the starting area is just how much money are we going to raise, and then we'll make that decision.
Mhm.
Most likely it's going to be the city of Jerusalem, the Duchy of Jerusalem, and most likely people will be starting there if it's an alpha or a beta release.
Okay.
But if not, you'd be able to, from the beginning, choose what kingdom you want to be a part of. So could be in a military order. You say, I want to start with the Knights Templar. You'd probably be at their castle at Karak. If
Mhm.
you want to be in the Kingdom of England, you'd be at their port city of Jaffa. If you wanted to be in the Ayyubids, you would probably start in Damascus,
Mhm.
or Cairo, depending on which one we decide to go with there.
Honestly, I would absolutely love to try to be part of the Order of Assassins you have planned in there. So that is actually really cool.
Got a lot of love for that. A lot of history for myself with that faction in Lionhearts. That's a faction I started 15 years ago. I started that faction, and it actually it carried all the way through, and we put it into Lionhearts, and fascinating history of
Yeah.
that group of people. Obviously inspired that Assassin's Creed franchise, especially Assassin's Creed 1 is based off of the historical Nizari Ismaili assassins that
Right.
existed. But we would love to add the assassin faction, and it's in one of our stretch goals. So if we can get there, we will. And even if we don't raise all that money, we're still going to do as much as we can with it, and either launch follow-up fundraisers or use the proceeds from the betas and the alphas to keep working and pushing towards those things, because we want them as much as everybody else does.
So you have experience in larger communities, like um, online communities at least, and um, you probably have an idea of what it's going to be like to run a kingdom, considering that you just said you started your own faction 15 years
I was a
ago.
faction leader for a decade, yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah, so you,
I
so
actually think
it's,
I
yeah,
think it trained me to run a business because it's so yeah, I had a job when I was 11. I was a
yeah,
full-time and if you've never run an online faction or group like that with people, we would have so much crazy drama and wars and
that's what makes it
Andrew
fun.
actually served in that. I met him online through that and we used to I had some pretty authoritarian and I ran a tight ship, but I would make him like write weekly reports because he was one of my high ranks. So I'd make all my high ranks write weekly reports, and if they didn't, I would demote them. And if they wanted to get promoted, they have to write applications. So it was extremely sophisticated, and we grew a lot of renown for that. And eventually, I wanted to turn it into a wider game, and so we found all the other factions, and we made something called the Third Crusade back in 2015. And essentially, all these factions, we had the Templars and the Assassins and the Ayyubids. We came together. We used to have these things called road battles where we'd kind of compete over territory. And then a few years later, I said, why don't we make this into an MMORPG? We were already on Roblox.
Right.
I was a little in over my head, but I've learned through the years by making so many mistakes, what not to do, like really. And I'm very open and honest about the mistakes because we tried to make the game too big. We tried to add everything that sounded cool. And now what we've done is said, what actually is the core of what Lionheart should be? And if it's not directly related to that, it's extraneous and it doesn't need to be worked on right now. And so that's why I'm confident, even though that our goals are ambitious,
Mhm.
I'm confident we can achieve them because we've tried them out and we know what works and what doesn't. And we formulated a very detailed plan over the last 6 or 7 months, really laboring to find what's the best gameplay loop and what would work the best to provide the really awesome, innovative experience that people want without overdoing it and making a crazy scope. So you're looking at Star Citizen, it's been 20 years, it's not out. Not to keep picking on Star Citizen, it's an
No,
awesome
no,
project.
no, absolutely do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, don't
No,
hold
I
back
mean
on
I
that
don't
one.
want to because they've had so much success because they have such a
Yeah.
good idea and they've raised millions and millions and millions of dollars and that's amazing. And I would dream of being in their position and that's because their idea is so good. So I don't want to pick on them, but I use them as an example because that's the example of the game of the scope that's just so huge, right? And I get that because it's so exciting to think about a game that scope is so huge and Lionhearts can and will get there in time. But as I said, if it's not fun on a small scale, it's not going to be fun on a big scale. You can't just add maps and expect it to make it more exciting. I mean, Lionheart's Crusade on Roblox is bigger than the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. It's huge. I mean, I spent a lot of that time myself building and level designing those maps for years and years. It's massive and it's incredible and it wows people. But after they're wowed, okay, now what do I do? Because we didn't fill it up with enough content along the way. And so what we're trying to do is one, we want the players to make the content. Two, we only want to make as much map as the players can handle, and that will be fun and sustained. And then when it's crowded and people are complaining, that's a good problem to have because it
Yeah.
means the game's success. And then we can expand. And then, oh, wow, it's like the Wild West. A whole new region just opened up that I can explore. There's so much opportunity. There's more kingdoms, there's more factions. And I think that's going to be a much more natural progression. Now, if we hit the highest fundraising goal, maybe we'll just launch with a much bigger map than you might think, but it's still not going to be bigger than we can handle.
Right. And that's good, taking it step by step and not getting in over your heads. As you said, there are some studios out there where their ideas are bigger than they can achieve, and then they just crumble when they try to um, skip steps, pretty much.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's get in more detail about the combat specifically, because as you can tell from the content on my channel, a lot of my medieval games that I play, which by the way, huge medieval fan. I think I'm not. Don't call me a nerd, but like ever since I was a child, I was fascinated by the idea of knights. Turns out they're not as good as I thought. I learned that as an adult. They are not knights. Typically weren't the best people, but whatever. Moving on. Melee combat. What would you compare it to? Is it directional combat? Would you say like games like uh, Mountain Blade, or have you ever played those games actually? Like Mordhau, Chivalry 2, Joe
I'd
combat,
say
but
it's similar to Mordhau and Mountain Blade, although those aren't games that when I was helping design it that I directly had a lot of experience with.
right,
So our combat still has its own unique hinges, and it's four directional. It's different than those other games in some ways. It relies on a parry system. If you have a shield, you can't parry, but you don't have to block directionally.
right.
And the combat in Lionheart's Crusade is great to go play in demo because it's going to be very similar to the combat in Lionhearts on Steam. And actually, the combat in Crusade is one of the most fun and enjoyable parts because it's so skill based. It takes so long to master. There's this guy Messi who is like the goat of Lionheart's combat, and he's on the top of the matchmaking leaderboards. And like I don't understand how he's human because the way how fast his reaction speeds are and how he's it's awesome. And then when he comes on the battlefield, it can turn the tide just
Oh
because of
yeah,
how huge he is. How not to pump up his ego too much. He probably doesn't need it, but
yeah,
the
right, yeah.
the no, but him and some others, they just I would say I'm like mid tier, if not below average, and I'm still way better than a new player because that's how much skill is required. It takes some time to learn, and but I ask your other comment. You know, I think I think we're trying to display a world in which the chivalry of knights can still shine through in that ideal,
Right.
and certainly it wasn't something that was always lived up to, and each individual, was still accountable for their deeds, good or bad, especially when you're talking about something like the Crusades.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, there were some really awesome virtues and nobility and ideals that these knights believed in, specifically like the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, protecting pilgrims, healing the sick. And so I think those sort of cultures, especially with the religious ties, are really going to be able to shine through. And players are going to have a great time role playing and even embodying those roles as they progress.
Now, maybe not large scale battles. Let's say, for example, is there PvP like in the open world where like maybe like I come across somebody and um I
Yeah.
just don't like the shoes they're wearing, so I just decide to fight them. So,
Yeah, I think open world PvP will exist definitely.
okay,
A lot of the times it might be more structured, but because the world's open and stitched together, that will happen, and you may lose some loot if you lose. Although we like to balance that stuff and make sure it doesn't feel too punishing, but
right,
also exciting enough that when you're walking across the open world, it doesn't seem boring.
right, and I can understand like for newer players, right, to like games like that, that's not an enjoyable experience where they lose everything, right? But like
No.
some players like the torture aspect, like me, but yeah, that yeah, I
You'd like
see.
those permadeath games then. I think for new players, you have to be very careful what you expose them to. And that's sort of what the favor tree is doing with progression as well,
Mhm.
is because at the bottom tiers, you're not participating in a massive siege right off the bat because you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
But you're having fun learning. You're having fun fighting maybe a minor skirmish, learning the ropes here and there, maybe harvesting resources, attending different religious services, and learning your way. And ideally, it's going to be very reliant on people playing with friends and making friends and finding a retinue where people can mentor you and teach you these things and protect you. Because I don't really envision a game where people are just solo walking around. I envision a game where people are with their friends, and that's kind of what's happened on Crusade. Is the community's been active and amazing for years. It's what's kept it so alive and vibrant, and the friendships and all the things that they've developed over time, and all the crazy stories of what's happened in the game is all made by them. We've just facilitated it.
So like different war bands would be walking around, come across guys wearing red, and I can already imagine this is gonna be a blast when we get there. Now
Absolutely.
when it comes to when it comes to like large scale battles, people are gonna die, right? Everyone, like someone's gonna die. Now, when it comes to dying in a game like this, like, is it like a permadeath? What are we risking when we're defeated? Are we losing
Yeah.
our favor, which is kind of like our experience levels in our the tier system or the favor system that you got going on? What are we losing?
Yeah. So the game I feel is pretty consequential enough without permadeath.
Okay, good.
I think permadeath would make it. I think permadeath's a really exciting idea. And
I
we've
love it.
played with ideas of having permadeath areas. But what we did in Crusade is we had areas called Infernum zones,
Okay.
where if you die there, you drop all your loot. And so some of that loot they acquired took years to acquire, but you don't have to go into these areas.
Right.
There's some incentives, and so there's always some fun stories and people have like unwritten rules. Oh, don't camp Infernum zones. Don't because the mining is better there.
I'm camping
But
those. I'm
for
sorry.
Lionhearts on Steam, I don't know anything if we're doing Infernum zones or not. It's definitely not a priority. But when you die, the consequence is actually towards the granary, especially in a battle or a siege. So you might lose some loot in full-fledged open PvP, but it's very minor. The big, the bigger consequence is that if your granary is not well stocked, every time somebody dies, that's a loaf of bread there. It's another loaf of bread there. And so food is going to be the respawn mechanic. So it's more of a
Oh, okay.
communal uh, push and pull rather than on the individual. So before a battle, the jobs of the kingdoms will be to stock their granaries and stock their provisions if they're the ones sieging to bring those provisions so that they don't run out of reinforcements in battle. So when you die, you basically respawn as a reinforcement. Um, Although there probably will be a little bit of delay, and if they're out of food, then you only get one life left, and then it becomes like permadeath because you have one life, and
Right.
now obviously you'll respawn out of the siege. It's not like your character will die forever, but it's pretty consequential towards food storage, but not to individual characters.
We talked about earlier the duchies and real estate, plots of land. First of all, when it comes to like set pieces that the developers make, the game designers make, such as the cities themselves, since you have a degree in history, how much does detail mean to you when it comes to these cities and the armor sets, even, uh,
Yeah.
and how the world looks?
Great question. So we believe in historicity. There's a term that I use. Andrew doesn't like it because it's kind of misleading. It's called historical deniability.
Okay.
It sounds like we're denying historism, but that's not what I mean. It's more like historical plausibility, not going against the sources that we know. Historical accuracy is it's a loaded term. I've
Right.
made videos on my channel about it. You could watch. Um, Credenzio is the channel, but the important thing is, does this feel authentic? Because we don't actually have the archaeological records and everything we need to do a one-to-one of every city. But
Right.
we know some of the important buildings. We know it probably didn't look like this. We know there weren't skyscrapers and spaceships, right? To exaggerate. And so
Right.
you actually get a fairly long leash and creative freedom in what you can design, but it still takes a lot of research. Like the city of Acker I built with Zach like 5 years ago, we took a ton of time to research it. And the records that we could find and adding all the important buildings and then the city around it. And I'm still sure it doesn't look anything like the real city did because we have no idea because we don't have pictures and we
Yeah,
don't
but
have.
it could possibly,
Exactly. It
yeah,
it it
yeah.
doesn't feel when you're walking in it, it feels like you could have been there.
Right.
And that's what's important, right? When you're adapting something like that, a medium that's mostly recorded via text and you're trying to make it visual, just like a movie adaptation, like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, right? Doesn't look the same way Tolkien imagined it, I'm sure,
Oh no.
but it still feels like Tolkien's world, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're adapting something, it's really important to keep the authenticity. So stuff like plate armor didn't exist yet, so you need there's some records where like armor has been preserved because it's armor, right? And
Hmm.
we know what they had and what they didn't have, but even stuff like clothing, most clothing deteriorates in a matter of a few decades and it's completely lost. I mean, so you have to look at statues and paintings and things like that to know what people wore. And so even though we might have some garments that have defied odds and, lasted, it's very difficult to know for sure. But
Right.
you can make inferences, and it requires a lot of research. This is why we're going to work with historical experts, and we're going to work on doing as much research as we can to really make sure we're building an authentic medieval portrait.
Castles and duchies and the land surrounding them. You mentioned real estate, right? Which you do have experience in yourself because before you did Credenzio Studios, you worked in real estate for a little bit.
That's
Um,
right.
how does that? How does that? Your experience with real estate and how's that gonna affect real estate in the game? How is that comparative to real life real estate, such as like the value rising over time
Yeah.
or et cetera, et cetera?
What a great question. Yeah, that's a deep cut. You've done your research. Yeah, amazing question. So real estate in game, like when I see some of these MMOs and other games, and oh, I own every house in the game. Oh, I own because they have infinite copies.
Right.
And it's just like, well, that doesn't actually mean anything. It's cool. It's like, hanging a pelt on the wall, I guess. But I think the idea of private property, meaning that it's just yours, is a very motivating factor for competition. And I also think that it allows the market to flourish because a house that has infinite copies has no value.
Right.
A house that has one copy has a ton of value. And so when you're leased a land, it's a big deal. It's a big reward. Now, what we're doing is actually we're bridging it. When you're lower, you get a room in a barracks and there's infinite rooms. And
Right.
so you can have storage and you can put stuff up on the walls and all that. But if you actually want to own a keep or a house or an independent dwelling or a trade house or whatever, a church building, or even the barracks itself, you have to buy it and you have to actually be granted it by the king. And you have to come up through the ranks. And property is going to be very valuable in that way.
And so from what you're saying, it seems like it's pretty everything literally is player driven.
Yes.
Such as yeah, so it's the possibilities in this game are pretty much endless when it comes to every aspect. Really, you could literally be from what we're talking about, you could be into real estate and just do that in the game, or you could be
Yeah.
a priest or a guild
Yeah.
master. Uh, I think that's very unique, and that would blow a lot of these MMORPGs out the water, considering some advertise player driven this and that, and in reality, it really isn't.
Yeah.
Comparatively to like PAX Day, um, and Ashes of Creation, which is not out yet, but it's not looking too great so far. Um, so like as for when it comes to the gameplay loop, what I think most people would ask this, like, what is the end game? Are there going to be things like wipes, or is it just like, is it a constant just cycle or a constant persistent world where um, the only things that will ever change is because of player action? What would be the end game for players that are seeking end games? Are there endless possibilities? What would you say to that? Like what do you think? What is the end game?
Yeah. Let me answer your question in sort of two parts.
Yes.
One, as I said, the idea and the motivation for us as developers is to set up the framework for players to thrive in and create.
Uh
To
huh.
say everything's player driven, in a sense, it's going to be true. In another sense, obviously, as developers, we have to set parameters
Of
and
course.
rules and outlines because that's what a game is. If you don't have any rules and parameters, it's not a game. But
Yeah.
the idea is you allow enough mechanics for the players to thrive and create things that are better than what you could ever do. It's not going to be super, super sandboxy like Minecraft, but there's going
Right.
to be enough sandboxy elements that the players can, terraform and change the world in a very meaningful way. Now, the second part, to answer the question about late game. So, for many people, just becoming a knight or a priest or an artisan is going to be their late game. And again, instead of moving up more vertically, they can if they want, that becomes a hyper competitive, cyclical, as you mentioned, process, meaning I'll become the Lord and then I can invite a contest to become the Duke, but I'll probably get overthrown eventually or I'll have to step down because it's such a difficult thing. And maybe I'll last years in that position, but monarchs and stuff, they come and go. Uh,
Yeah.
Holding on to your knighthood and basically progressing horizontally is what I'd like to say with the gold economy, obtaining more gold, buying more land, acquiring better horses and steeds, or if you're in the trades, becoming more and more efficient at collecting resources and crafting different items. And so the needs of the kingdom will be constantly driving your progression as well, because you're going to want to help your kingdom and your retinue succeed.
Okay. The end game is what you make it. In a sense. And when can we expect the Kickstarter to launch, actually?
Yeah, it should be within a matter of weeks now. I
Okay.
can't make any promises because if we're able to get more stuff into it and we want to delay it because we think it'd be a better chance, we will. So I don't have an official date, but it could be a matter of weeks. So the best thing you can do, if you're listening to this, please make a Kickstarter account. Please go and follow the Kickstarter. It's the number one thing you could do. And then wishlist our game on Steam. It's already on Steam. Uh, you can check out our website. We're about to relaunch it with a bunch more info where you can learn. It's going to have all the extensive details about what we've planned, which you yourself seem to have already read. And I think as far as the Kickstarter goes, there's going to be various tiers that you can buy to get, more game keys for your friends, get awesome cosmetics and limited time things that will not be available on launch. These are only going to be for donors. And we are going to really be relying on you guys for this thing to work. We're relying on this Kickstarter. We're an independent studio. We don't have an angel investor. We're not privately funded by some giant entity. We're trying to make a community driven and a community led game, and so we need community support. And your support is so valuable to us. So please follow the Kickstarter and save up your money so you can donate to the highest tier you can afford.
Yeah, and I actually want to say too, I highly recommend, if anyone's listening, or not if anyone, whoever is listening, you definitely check these guys out on Kickstarter.com. They have a in-depth, just everything that they plan on in the game, what they have so far, pages of just stuff to answer any questions you may have about what's in the game. And it is a lot that is coming, and it seems like it's going to be a experience that no game has been able to capture since gaming took off on PC in the early 2000s. So
That's
I'm
what we're trying to do, man.
exactly.
And we need your guys' support. And again, it's going to be player driven. So if you have any ideas or suggestions, join our Discord. Come join the conversation. I'll be answering questions in there all the time. Our staff's going to be talking in there all the time. So if you want to make an impact on this game, you can. And come hop in now and start making suggestions and participating.
Yeah, and I'll have all those links in the description, so please feel free to check those out. Well, I think that is everything actually, Colt. You have me for sure going to be supporting you on Kickstart. So
Amazing.
absolutely. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. And everybody, please check out those links. And we look forward to seeing you on launch day in game.
Absolutely.